The bill allows the GCSB to spy on New Zealanders and to pass what they learn on to foreign governments. If you don't do anything wrong, you've got nothing to hide, is a common response to criticism of such unprecedented power. But under certain circumstances, the SIS can already spy on New Zealanders, and so too can the police. But why are we giving our spies so much more power, so hastily, with so little meaningful scrutiny? And who exactly are we doing it for? In the black SUV, one of the key figures in the post-9/11 world America is trying to shape. His security detail look to and fro, checking their guns. So who receives such intense security in New Zealand? Well, his name is Eric Holder, and he's head of the US Department of Justice.
The Department of Justice under Eric Holder is out of control.
In Auckland, his control seemed absolute, as if America had somehow been transplanted here, which in a way it has, because not only has Holder worked closely with our government, he's also the man behind the Kim.com prosecution. Not that he wanted to discuss that with us. Our formal requests for an interview were also declined, on advice from New Zealand. But tonight we investigate what our relationship with Eric Holder and his colleagues means not only for Kim.com, but for us all. This is an in-house video detailing what Eric Holder does and the remarkable powers he has.
Well, the Attorney General is certainly the nation's chief law enforcement officer, and that means an awful lot of things. There are a number of consequential threats to the United States that I have to deal with. And we identify those that are serious threats, and we monitor them, disrupt them, and to the extent we can, ultimately destroy them.
Ultimately destroy them. This extraordinary raid, later declared illegal by the High Court, is the most public example of Eric Holder's request to New Zealand.
Ground units, gates are open.
But there are other less well-known examples too, and one of them is crucial. A meeting in Australia in July 2011, 6 months before the .com raid.
From the United States, Mr. Eric Holder.
This was the 15th of July 2011. On the far left, our Attorney General, Chris Finlayson, and beside him, Eric Holder himself. Also there, Australia, Britain and Canada, completing the so-called Five Eyes partnership. What were they discussing?
Cybercrime.
Yes, cybercrime, like mega upload, for example. What else?
The use of intelligence in legal proceedings.
Yes, intelligence. Now remember, the GCSB illegally helped with intelligence in the .com case. What else?
Extradition.
Yes, extradition, which is what the US needed to get .com into America. And New Zealand's role at the conference?
It's the whole issue of extradition and how we can look at improving extradition, which can be a rather cumbersome method of bringing people to justice.
Now let's remind ourselves, this high-powered meeting, with its very precise and US-led focus, took place on July 15th, 2011, a week exactly before this.
I want to welcome Prime Minister Keith to the Oval Office.
John Key and Barack Obama is shot by the White House's own camera, July 22nd, 2011.
John, welcome again. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Side by side in the Oval Office.
As we try and join others like the United States in making the world a safer place.
The single warmest greeting New Zealand had received in Washington since we said no nukes in 1984. Breakthrough words, breakthrough symbolism, and the Prime Minister himself was delighted.
All right, thank you, everybody.
So in mid-July 2011, the Prime Minister was meeting the President in Washington. Our Attorneys General were discussing cybercrime and intelligence gathering, and something else was going on too, quite out of the blue. Can we go back to mid-July 2011 and that phone call you received from the Prime Minister? Was that completely out of the blue? Were you expecting it in any way at all?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, and what did he say? Did he have to introduce himself? Did you recognise his number?
No. No. When the Prime Minister of New Zealand calls and the call's put through to you, you know who you're about to speak to.
Okay, and so what did he say
so that's
to you?
Important.
What did he say to you when he called?
Well, he said that He wondered if I might be interested in looking at a vacancy which there was for Director, Chief Executive of GCSB.
This was Ian Fletcher on our program exactly 3 months ago. Let's stop him there and remind ourselves that he was an old schoolmate of John Key's, that he had no military experience, and that the PM approached him directly about the GCSB job in the very same mid-July period he was meeting Obama and Finlayson was meeting Holder to discuss cybercrime and intelligence.
Supplementary question, Grant Robertson.
How did he come to have Ian Fletcher's phone number when he called him in July 2011?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no clue.
Question time, Parliament, April 16th.
No, order. It was a reasonable question, which I don't think should be difficult for the Prime Minister to answer. How did he come to have the phone number?
Mr Speaker, I genuinely have no clue. I don't know how I got the number.
There have been a few moments of forgetfulness and confusion in this saga, but always, in the end, reassurances that due process was followed. So, even when the Prime Minister admits,
I rang Ian Fletcher.
Let's stop him there, he immediately goes on to qualify it by saying,
and said that if he was interested in the position, he would need to go through a process and should call Martin Weavers in the first instance.
Reminding us that people like Martin Weavers, remember that name, the highly regarded former head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, were part of the process too, and indeed was one of the people who independently interviewed Ian Fletcher for the job. Fair point. But look at this document. It's Martin Weavers' expense form from that period, and we can see from it he travelled with the PM to the United States on that highly successful Washington trip. And within 24 hours of returning from that trip, Weavers was interviewing Ian Fletcher for the GCSB job John Key himself had suggested Fletcher apply for.
At the time, I wasn't aware of the vacancy, and it was very courteous of him to call. And so I went on from there to look, and as kind of recent media commentary has exposed, the rest is history.
History, it is indeed, and so is this too. This is Pike River, and the machine we're seeing was used to remove oxygen from the mine after those tragic explosions. It was sent to Pike from Queensland, and the department Ian Fletcher was then heading in the state before he got the phone call from John Key and was interviewed by a panel including Martin Weavers. Martin Weavers, who told Fairfax that sometime in the months before Fletcher was offered the GCSB job, he, quote, was in Wellington privately on some occasion and popped in to see if everything was going okay. Popped in to the Beehive. His visits would become somewhat more formal in July. The month New Zealand's Attorney-General met Eric Holder to discuss cybercrime, intelligence and extradition. The month John Key, travelling with Martin Weavers, was welcomed with unusually open arms into the White House. And the month when Ian Fletcher was approached by John Key himself for a job that essentially signalled a reinvention of the GCSB, moving away from its old military roots into a very different kind of world. A world the government is now writing into law, the GCSB Bill. And the question is, who will keep an eye on how the GCSB uses its new power under this bill? The PM? Ian Fletcher? Eric Holder? Who? And what do they need all that new power for?
This bill condones the illegal invasion of the privacy of each and every person in New Zealand. This bill is not constitutional. It is not consistent with human rights. It is a grotesque violation of the Commonwealth principles that were enunciated in Harare.
Robert Amsterdam is a London-based Canadian, a human rights lawyer who's represented political prisoners and opposition politicians throughout much of the world. He's now part of the .com legal team. He says all New Zealanders should ask our government two simple questions. One, what do they need the new spying powers for? And two, where are our security threats?
I'd love to find out who it is today that's attacking New Zealand and why the New Zealand authorities need this massive power. And then once I understand those threats, we can discuss it. But for today, this document should be shelved and time should be taken to approach it. And the recommendations of the New Zealand Law Society should be internalized, and their white paper that I've read and that I respect so much should be read by every New Zealander.
.com personally received residency approval in October 2010. He then tried to buy this house, the Crisco Mansion as it used to be called, applying to the Overseas Investment Office for consent. On the 5th of April 2011, they recommended consent and sent that recommendation to the Beehive. Land Information Minister Maurice Williamson signed off on that consent just 2 days later. A yes. But 3 months after that, Associate Finance Minister Simon Power said no. The date he declined consent, July 18th, 2011. And remember what was happening at exactly that time. Yes, as we saw earlier, John Key was calling Ian Fletcher, who got the GCSB job. The PM was meeting the President, and Chris Finlayson was meeting Eric Holder. So, let's add Simon Power into that busy few days as well. And now let's add someone else. Grant Wormolds, the police officer in charge of the action for the FBI against Kim.com.
Just let me know when you're ready.
This is the morning of the police raid on the .com mansion, January 20th, 2012, just hours after this.
All call signs, all call signs. This is...
When .com and his co-accused had been taken away, Grant Wormold fronted the media with details of the raid, including when he was first asked to make the arrests for Eric Holder's US Department of Justice.
This has been an investigation which I've personally been involved in since around about August last year with a team from the Organised Financial Crime Agency in New Zealand.
Since around August of 2011. In other words, immediately after all those very busy days in July.
It is almost incomprehensible for me to imagine that New Zealand would pass legislation that reflects so much fear of some foreign force. I had no idea New Zealand had so many enemies. I had no idea New Zealand was under attack. I had no idea New Zealand had suffered under 9/11.
We have been trying to get to the bottom of what happened here. We've had to drag every single detail out from John Key. His story has changed constantly. He's slipped, he's slided, he's given half the truth, and that's just not good enough.
He will not come clean, sir. He keeps on saying that he gives the answer, and then we find there's another answer behind that one, and there's something else and something else.
The paper trail, well, actually, funny enough, bugger lugs, I'm not, but anyway.
Can he now confirm what involvement those staff had?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I can't confirm all involvements. I can confirm that SIS played a minor vetting role.
When a body as authoritative and dispassionate as the Law Society feels forced to report to the United Nations that the government in New Zealand is acting in conflict with the rule of law, I think all of us need to be very concerned.
Can you now recall and tell the House who those other ministers were?
No.
Why did his acting Prime Minister sign a ministerial certificate to suppress and cover up GCSB's illegal activity?
Firstly, he wasn't covering something up. What actually happened was that GCSB wanted to have its name not in the public domain because it believed legally it had acted legally.
Which of the following statement does he stand by in his answers about knowledge of GCSB's involvement in the Kim.com case? No, I don't think so. No, I don't remember. Look, I don't know. You know, who knows? I'm not in a position to answer that. I don't remember cracking a joke, but I've cracked one because I crack jokes all the time.
This legislation must not, will not, and cannot stand.